I'm pretty sure most of you guys know my MO by now. If it's atmospheric, immersive, and terrifying, I'm all over it. So far, the survival horror genre has been the best at scratching that very specific itch. No matter if it's a first-person shooter, a tank controls-driven zombie dodging simulator, or a psychological thriller that makes me question my very existence, I can't get enough of these horrifying experiences. But there is one downside to having such, let's say, precise tastes. I often find myself sorely lacking in new games to creep me right out of my skin. Well, luckily I have the best friends a guy could ask for, and a recent gift on Steam from this guy is creeping me out in ways I never thought were possible. Can a brand new indie game really rub elbows with some of the genre's heaviest hitters? Well, I'm Jared, and this is Avalanche Reviews. Before we get started, I really want to thank my fellow multi-tapper, NA1eye over on Twitter, for gifting me this bad boy. After Risk of Rain and this, I'm starting to think he knows me a little better than I know myself. So right off the bat, there are two key factors that keeps me from revealing much about Darkwood's story. First off, this is a game that's best experienced with as little info as possible, and second, there isn't a whole lot to discuss. The game starts off by giving away almost nothing, and any more details are found only after fighting tooth and nail for them. But this would be a very boring place to leave things, so in the spirit of at least scratching the surface, you play as a guy. Yep, just some guy. You wake up in a small town somewhere in the Soviet bloc, which is a genius setting for a horror game in and of itself, and what little information our character already knows, he isn't too keen on verbalizing. Apparently, the trees around this village started growing out of control some time ago and eventually grew so thick that leaving became impossible. As the vegetation inches closer to completely engulfing the village, things start getting even weirder. People are going insane, eerie supernatural events are taking place regularly, and a plague is turning your neighbors into violent mutations. Really and truly, I shouldn't give too much more away than this. This is really one of those experiences you should come into with as little information as possible, which is pretty easy to do. I mean, look at this anemic Wikipedia page. Yes, you can find out more about the game on its Wikia, but I highly recommend steering clear of it. Piecing together this horrifying tale is a huge part of the appeal here, and this makes it really hard to describe, but trust me when I say the story is dark, creepy, and supremely satisfying. If you love digging deep for every little detail in Silent Hill, or the environmental storytelling of the Stalker games, you are absolutely going to love this game. And if that statement alone didn't bring you to the peak of orgasm, well, you might need to start assessing some things in your life. Darkwood's approach to gameplay can best be summed up by its loading screen. And when they say you won't be led by the hand, they mean exactly that. Only the most basic elements of controlling your character are ever explained, leaving the rest of the game's mechanics up to the player to learn. So what exactly is there to learn? Well, the game essentially controls like a bastard offspring of a survival horror game and a top-down shooter. To boil it down to the basics, the left stick moves the character's body and the right stick moves his head. L1 can be held to ready an attack, and using the right stick during this essentially allows you to strafe. Combat tends to draw more from the survival horror side of the family, meaning any fights you don't run from are going to be a sizable challenge, with an emphasis on pattern recognition. So now that we have the basics down, the question is, what exactly do we do in this game? Well, our main objective is to find a way out of this village, and that will require a bit of exploration. And if you've seen my Stalker reviews, you know damn well I love snooping around the ruins of old abandoned buildings. Just like Stalker, Darkwood carefully balances your desire to explore with the risk of doing so. Moving around the four main areas of the game seem like a pretty small hurdle to jump. I mean, this isn't exactly the largest game world anyone's ever seen, but the inclusion of 3 small elements makes this an insanely difficult game if you don't come into it with the right attitude. First, there's the stamina meter. This makes sure you never feel too confident in your ability to get from point A to B, which leads into the second element, danger. Just deciding to venture into an unexplored part of the map can be nerve-wracking as hell, since any square inch of the map can contain bear traps, poisonous mushrooms, bloodthirsty enemies, or a weird type of noxious growth that damages you when you walk over it. Sure, you might find some materials or a few healing items, but is it worth the wear and tear you'll put on your weapon or the amount of healing items you'll use just to get there? And that's not even taking into account the game's most stressful feature, the inclusion of day to night cycles. Sure, running around an abandoned village filled with inhuman creatures is pretty terrifying, but the nighttime is a whole new level of pants-pissing horror. Getting caught outside at night is not a situation you want to be in. Not only do the game's monsters become way more active and plentiful, but there's also a red mass that comes out of the ground and slowly kills you. This makes hunkering down your only real option, and of the few still standing houses in the area, you only have 4 possible places to take shelter in. It seems that a special gas is needed to keep this gory red stuff from tearing you apart, and only specified hideouts are able to generate this gas from a stove. When the night comes, it's going to be a good idea to board up any possible entries and, well, pray that nothing breaks in. On a serious note, these nighttime segments are some of the most thrilling and terrifying moments I've ever had with a video game. Since line of sight is tied to the actual character and not the camera, you won't be able to see any possible threats moving around in other parts of the house, but you can hear them, and I can assure you that this makes things insanely tense. In another bout of the game not giving up any secrets, I only found out through trial and error that monsters will respond to light coming out of the room you're in and any noises you're making by moving around. Once they know you're in there, enemies will try to destroy any barriers that's in their way. Having a boarded up window or door between you and them is preferable, but stacking large pieces of furniture or using traps to keep them at bay will also get the job done. Sometimes random creepy events will take place during the night, like people showing up in the room with you or crazed villagers being drug onto the property and set on fire. And don't even get me started on how scary it is hearing a knock at the door and a voice calmly telling you to come outside. All of these events are randomized, and sometimes you'll go a couple of days without ever being found by an enemy. This randomized system makes sure you're never really ready for what's in store, which I found out the hard way one night in the game. See, I was just locked in a room minding my own business when a monster I had never seen before barges in and starts screaming. This scream somehow turned off my generator, which meant I was left in total darkness. When the lights came back on, I was face to face with several little bird-looking things I'd never seen before. They rushed at me, and in a cramped quarters, I couldn't do much. With a tiny amount of life left, I found a choke point, readied my weapon, and prepared to go down swinging. My first hit took one of them down, and just when I thought it was over, the morning light came and I was safe. The best part about that story is everyone who plays this game is bound to have one of their own. Moments like this make this a damn memorable experience, but I do have to give a couple of words of warning. First and foremost, this is an unreasonably difficult game, at least until you figure out all of its little intricacies. Combat starts out feeling slow and awkward, but eventually you'll get an idea for how it works and how to best manage your stamina. Soon you'll find yourself slowing down to conserve enemy for some unseen enemy that you might come across. Everything wants to kill you in this game, and you should assume that they will. Dying on normal mode only strips you of half your items, and these can be found on your corpse when you get back to the area you died in. Hard mode? Well, let's just say hard mode is for second and third playthroughs only. The second issue is the secretive nature of the game. There is literally nothing I have ever come across that tells me to hit X while aiming to reload my weapon, and I'm embarrassed to admit how far through the game I was before meeting the bike man because I didn't try to use an item that I had no reason to assume was usable. The moral of the story here is try everything in this game. If it looks like you can interact with something, you probably can, and don't worry about the risk involved with experimenting with items or mechanics. The knowledge you'll gain will almost always be worth it. And finally, I do have one small gripe with the stamina bar. See, I appreciate the role it plays in making me balance movement, exploration, and combat, but I feel like the game could have really benefited from a slight decrease in how fast it drains. Oftentimes, I'll find myself stressing out more over this 1 meter than anything else. Stopping a dead run to tiptoe my way to a full stamina meter every few minutes can really beat the hell out of the game's flow. Oh yeah, also, there's a crafting system because, Why wouldn't there be? Obviously, I've never been a huge fan of crafting systems in games like this, but I can admit when they're implemented well. Going out and scavenging for junk feels like a proper part in the game world, and even though I hate the idea of survival games must include crafting systems, I have to say here it works. Every system and mechanic in this game complements the others in a very cohesive way. The crafting informs the survival elements, the combat enforces the terror, and the stamina gauge controls the pace. Each of these elements come together to form an absolutely engrossing experience that I had major problems putting down. Really, the best compliment I can give took place during my first playthrough. I was about 10 hours in and I had gotten myself into a shitty situation. I decided to start a new game and in doing so put another 20 or 30 hours in. At no point did I lament having to go through another 10 hours just to catch back up, and to be honest, I would gladly do it again. This is definitely one of those games you play just to be in its world, and if you love dark horror games that will scare you directly out of your skin, trust me, this is a world you want to be in. And if you need any further convincing, I can say with 100% certainty, I will be starting a new game the very second I'm done putting this review together. Now, this is a game that personifies how much design apes graphical fidelity. At the risk of giving my opinion away too soon into this segment, I just have to say, this is an amazing looking game. The 2D art is to die for, and the world's been designed in a way that enforces the dark and abandoned mood the gameplay sets up. From the sprite scaling and rotation, I would say this is probably a game made in the Unity engine, but I don't know for sure. Instead of spending money and time on a huge 3D world, Team Acid Wizard created a supremely well-made 2D one. The sprite art is low res, but at the far off distance the camera's at, this looks more detailed than it actually is. Animations are surprisingly fluid and help lend weight to your character's actions. From stabbing with a pitchfork to climbing a fence, it's clear that our character is putting his all into this. Your typical enemies share the exact same detailed animations, which works well with how much attention is required for combat. Attacks are always preceded by tells and wind-ups that'll be obvious to you about your 30th time dying on them. One of the coolest effects is your vision cone. While you can vaguely see all around you, any specifics are only visible when inside your field of vision. This makes exploration tense since there could be an enemy hiding in the room you're in, but obscured by a couch or some other obstruction. As you might expect, your vision is greatly diminished at night, and yes, this does help the nighttime section scare the shit out of you. Without a doubt, the most impressive asset is the character art. This visual novel style animated artwork is absolutely beautiful, but very dark in a stylized kind of way. I personally like the wolf character, and if you're caught up in the fact that there's a humanoid wolf with a rifle walking around, don't worry, you're not alone. The lighting, environment, post-processing effects, and overall design are well above what you would expect from a 3-person studio and even surpasses a lot of big-budget productions. Productions that will remain nameless out of respect for its creators. Final Fantasy VI. Well, there's no two ways about it. This game uses a beautiful mix of 2D and 3D assets to build a hugely immersive world. If you're looking to be equal parts terrified and impressed, step right up. Oh, and bonus points if you could play this in the dark with headphones on. Alright guys, here we have a majorly underrated horror experience, but let's take a look at the pros and cons in the spirit of letting you know what you're in for. There's no other way to say this. Darkwood will scare the shit out of you more times than you'll be comfortable admitting. Darkwood is sporting some crazy interesting art design and really well animated 2D sprites. This game's challenge is just hard enough to keep you coming back for more, and on medium difficulty, the penalties are just lenient enough to avoid being annoying. A horror game lives and dies by its audio design, and trust me when I say, hearing an enemy ransacking your hideout and walking right by your door is fucking terrifying. The inclusion of a stamina meter was a good idea, but it drains a little too fast for my liking, which leaves me slowly creeping around every few seconds in fear of being caught with my pants down. Don't expect this game to tell you much of anything regarding how to play it. Key items may go unused and you may not know vital elements of gameplay until you stumble on them, probably by accident. Alright, so it should be clear by now, I absolutely loved this game. It kept me in a constant state of scared shitless and totally invested. If you're looking to actually feel like you've just survived a terrifying event, I would definitely recommend jumping into Darkwood. It stays around the $10 to $15 range, and that's a steal for the level of quality you'll be buying into. You fans of Stalker and Silent Hill are going to feel very familiar with what you find in this desolated Eastern European town. And to be honest, I wonder if you're even listening to this, as you should already be in the process of buying it. Well guys, that's about it for me, but stay tuned because I will be back with more soon. And as usual, I'm Jared. And this is Avalanche Reviews. Hey guys, thanks for swinging by. It was nice to take just a small break from the Resident Evil retrospective. If you like horror games, check out these bad boys on screen right now. And if you like what I do here, maybe think about supporting me on Patreon to help put out more content just like this.